Welcome to the Intercut podcast channel, the weekly place to hear the latest on the movies, TV, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he's traveled through time to deliver you this message. It's Arturo Zurita.
Glad I made it in time. It was a whole issue, but we got here.
Just in the nick of time. We're really excited to talk about all things time travel, as well as a really upcoming exciting movie. We're joined by the director of Things Will Be Different, Michael Felker. Thanks for joining us, man. Really a pleasure to have you on Intercut.
Yeah, man. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I'm so stoked to talk about this movie, but I'm even more stoked to just be on this podcast and hang out with you guys. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a pleasure. You know, we connected shortly after South by Southwest because we got to catch your movie back then and really responded to it. And, it's exciting to talk to a person who's not just like involved in film as a director, but clearly like a big film fan. I think we were in proximity to each other, lining up for the Civil War screening at South by Southwest, which we miraculously both got into.
Yeah, I can't believe that happened. I was such a long line, and I hadn't had a chance to get like into like a big movie like that during this year's fest. And I was like,
Nice.
Oh my gosh, I'm not getting it. But we got in. It was great.
That was a massive one.
Definitely. How was your South by Southwest experience? And we obviously talk about it a lot from the perspective of being, film fans and doing it from the press perspective, but you brought a movie there, which feels like a entirely different kind of ordeal.
Yeah, it's a different whole thing where you not only, especially with its South by, this was our like world premiere, so you kind of are in this rush of just getting the movie kind of finished in a weird way. We didn't really finish the movie until like a month before the festival, like truly like see it on a big screen. So it was like a big rush to do that, and then you have to tell people about the movie, get a little bit of press going, and then you get your entire crew to go and like watch like the premiere. And by that time, the festival's halfway over. So you don't really get to like do anything other than sweat out your premiere. And so that one day where I got to see Civil War was like the one day I was like, I think I'm just going to go try to see something. So
Just
a little crazy, but its own kind of rush, I guess.
Relaxing with a nice Civil War movie by Alex Garland.
Perfect way to unwind.
That's just my weird
Right?
broken brain of like, I love Garland and I wanted to see how he was going to mess me up with some crazy movie like Civil War. So yeah,
Understands?
that's how I decompress.
I feel you.
Not entirely a surprise given the movie that you made, because it's another tense but kind of exhilarating film. So Things Will Be Different is about a brother and sister who are on the run after a robbery and then escape through a mysterious time portal in an isolated farmhouse. And I think one of the things that I really like about it is how it feels like a mashup of all these types of genres that I love, from like a bit of heist movie stuff to time travel stuff, and then you have like the domestic drama with the siblings at its core. Can you talk a bit about the impetus behind making the film and where that spark came from?
Yeah. So I grew up with like a very science like based family. I'm the only person in my family that's like working in sort of any art form. Like my dad's an engineer, my mom's a doctor, and my sister just got her doctorate in genetics. So it's just like a whole family that loves watching science fiction movies and just like pick them apart about the world and lore and theories afterwards. And so I kind of made the movie for them. Like, I wanted to like have a movie where, me and my dad would watch it, go to a coffee shop afterwards and talk about it for like 2 hours. And so Things Will Be Different is for that type of person who's like very science-based minded, but also wants like, a fun brother-sister story that's kind of based off me and my own sister, like estrangement, not seeing each other enough, and how we want to see each other more, but we don't. So all of that to say, it's like for all of the Felker family in a weird way. That was the impetus for sure.
Beautiful. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So are they grilling you about the specifics of the time travel in the movie and how it works, or are they picking it apart, or did you have to make sure it was like ironclad before they saw it?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I have it ironclad on like paper everywhere else, but it's like my favorite type of science fiction is the ones that leave me with a lot to like stew on afterwards. Like I feel like some of my favorite science fiction are the ones that leave you with more questions than answers. Like the reach for the answer is more interesting than grabbing it. So like my dad is a huge science fiction like reader, and so he loved like watching the movie and going like, oh, okay, so this is this and this is this, and like there's this possible theory here that you could play here, and just having that being like a fun puzzle box, but also a thing to just kind of stew over afterwards was really fun for all of my family. Obviously there's some people who are going to go like, what just happened? In which case I'm just like, yeah, that's also a good read too. But yeah, it's definitely for my family who loved picking it apart, and they picked it apart quite a bit in a very fun way.
That's good.
Were you looking at like other films to emulate, or is this just sort of drawing from like a big soup of your inspirations?
It's kind of like a soup, just because I grew up watching movies for so long. Like I have not like an encyclopedic knowledge, but I love all genres. I just watch everything. It's AMC A-list person that just goes to see as much as I can every single week. I'm in Burbank, California, which has like 3 AMCs and a block from each other. So I just go there and live there at the weekend. But the 2 main ones that we kind of pulled as like, main references were, and it leads to the other side of the other like genre besides sci-fi, which is like kind of like a thriller noir in a weird way. So we do Looper and Blood Simple are our like 2 main pulls, and just like how crazy down the rabbit hole you can go with like just the plot and what your characters react to, and putting them in impossible situations, and when push comes to shove, what do they do, not knowing what the other person does. I love both of those movies, especially Blood Simple, which was like, as soon as I was rewatching that for the 12th time, like 2 years ago, was like the main, like, I want to have fun, movie that I could go right. So yeah.
Yeah, we were just rewatching that recently for a Coen Brothers episode that we were doing. That's such a classic.
Oh, sick! Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I had it on hand. It might still be in the Blu-ray, which is why it's not near me, so I can pull it out. But yeah, that was one thing that I appreciated from the movie as well, because you have both of the siblings coming at it from different perspectives, how they're seeing the time travel, and I thought that was an interesting approach of having it be very character-based. It's not just so much them trying to figure it out, but them figuring it out from their perspectives and how they clash sometimes from it. I thought that was really nice. Really well done.
Yeah. No, that's a really good read of it. But basically, you could approach the movie in either one character's way or the other character's way, which, the sister character is like stewing in all these theories and kind of getting lost in like, a filing cabinet full of like paperwork, while the other one is just like cursing the gods and being like, why are you doing this to us? And so, because when you're stuck in a situation like that and trying to figure out what time travel is, that's the only way you can wrestle with it. So it's very, very character based from their POV.
Yeah, I thought that was done very, very well.
It's also a pretty ambitious movie, but a stripped-down film with minimal locations and actors, which seems like it would be ideal coming from a first-time feature director who probably doesn't have access to unlimited resources. Was there a version of this story that you wrote to be a bigger one, or was it kind of always this intimate script that would be more feasible to get made?
I have like this approach, I guess, because I work a lot in indie film. So I worked with the filmmaking duo Benson Moorhead a lot, in which they try to make all of their movies with what they're able to do within their skill set and their time and budget range. So like there is like a huge world that has been realized for lots of scripts that I put in drawers and didn't really do, because it's like hard to like, go make something for nothing. But as soon as I found the story I wanted to tell between this brother and sister character, I then had this world that I was then able to like pull to then filter their story through. And then using like what I learned from like Benson Moorhead movies, which are these also stripped down cosmic horror, like character dramas.
Big fans of Benson and Moorhead here.
Yeah. So like having gone through their school of thought, and we're kind of like a hive mind when making their movies, like they were huge in helping just guide and be as big of a support team as possible for making this. And so I had the world, but I could only figure out how to make the movie through like this smaller prism in which we can make it for basically nothing. So yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
We did definitely want to ask you a little bit more about Benson Moorhead. We had them on to talk about Something in the Dirt not too long ago. Yeah. I think we mistakenly called you a production assistant on our review of the movie, but you've done a lot more than that with them. Can you talk a bit more about how you got involved with Rustic Films and your roles behind the scenes on their movies?
Yeah, so production assistant's not too far off. My first job out of film school was being a production assistant on their first movie, Resolution.
There we go.
So basically, got involved with them when I was just trying to pay my rent out here, like about a decade ago. And then, Aaron and Justin, like, we went to a bar and, did a quote unquote interview, but they were like, hey, do you want to go like camp out in the woods and make this weird, like, bottle movie between two guys that's like a sci-fi horror? And I was like, hell yeah. And then from there I got more work as an editor, and by the time I was doing more freelance editing, that's when they brought me back in for their short film segment in VHS Viral. Ooh. Which is their they did like a skateboard horror cult movie called Bone Storm. It's pretty crazy. It has a lot of GoPro footage it's basically all recorded from skaters who do GoPro footage of them skating around, and then a cult attacks them, and it's genuinely insane. And we had such a good time with that I've just been editing their movies ever since. Like Springs was starting production as soon as that wraps, like a few months later. So we all kind of have this same hive mind of sci-fi, horror, thriller, drama that we grown up loving, and it's been great ever since. And then once I wrote Things Will Be Different and sent it to them, they were like, we would love to be a part of this and support you 100%. So glad they've been around, and they're still around, thankfully.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I was going to ask, because it does sort of have these similar lo-fi, gritty feels to a lot of their films. Is that, you're saying it's like kind of a shared reflection of your aesthetic preferences, or is it kind of the culmination of all your years working together that it's resulted in the feel of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I had written the script knowing that I could go shoot at there's like an abandoned family farm we had that we were going to go shoot in Michigan, and we nice. Kind of also structured a lot of the first draft of the script. So the first draft of the script just had a map of just the house and the layout where people can then go and look for how scenes were going to play out based off all these rooms. So I had this in mind, but when I send it to them, they kind of mirror reflecting back, being like, this is kind of a really awesome new take on something that we've been exploring with Resolution and The Endless. Yeah. And so hey, how do you explore a sibling or close friend dynamic through the prism of cosmic horror and the trappings of it that can be not just in a bigger world sense, but in a relationship character based way. So they were really helpful with that. And then they didn't even influence me too much. It just came from I worked with them a lot, and they just have very similar tastes. So it was pretty easy from there.
Nice, I'm sure, to have collaborators that you can have a shared sort of vision with. They had notes, but it wasn't as much as you would probably assume because just we all were I know exactly what you're doing there. You know what we're doing here. And they were very trusting, which I guess was really nice too. That's awesome. Great. Your movie does a really good job of breadcrumbing you with just enough information to pull you in, but still leave a bunch of things unanswered as you go. How did you find that balance while making the film, or did it really come down to stuff in the edit?
It's kind of every stage. You just kind of have to do we call this a confusion check. We do it with all of their movies too, as an editor, being the last line of information defense before the movie starts getting really finished. But every step of the way, when you're writing, when you're doing production, and then when you're editing, you kind of have to do what's good confusion versus what's bad confusion. And we always try to toe the line of just being hey, is this a question we want people to have? Do we want people to have confusion by design here? That's good confusion. If there's things where ooh, I actually want that to be clear, and someone's just truly not getting it, bad confusion. So we do as much getting people to watch it, especially people who don't know what the hell we did, to kind of really full check hey, what's what do we want people to get lost in and what people should be with. And it usually kind of like falls like good confusion is like, let's get them lost in the world so they can kind of like really swim in like this way where you don't even see the walls of production. You just see a fog of that the audience will just fill in. And an audience who fills in their own stuff is just going to do 10 times more of the heavy lifting than you will ever do as a filmmaker. Yeah. But the stuff we want to leave a little clear and a little more like heart-based is with the characters. So as long as you just feel what the brother and sister dynamic does between, you know, Adam David Thompson and Riley Dandy's performances, which they did so much of the great heavy lifting there. That was what needed to be emotionally resonant and emotionally clear. So yeah, we just check each other a lot, I guess, is the short answer of it.
With being an editor, do you do a lot of that like when you're there on set, like, or do you find yourself, you know, saving some stuff? I know you also have another editor for this film. Does that play into you now being a director, making that jump?
Yeah. So my co-editor, Rebecca, has been also kind of my confusion checker when I'm too in the weeds, where I'm just like, I think I know this. And then she's like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like because it being a time travel movie, we actually had the fortunate thing of shooting in 2 blocks. So we shot in winter of February 2023 and then edited as much as we could. And then we went back to shoot the summer portion for some time travel stuff in August of 2023. So it allowed us to be like, hey, if certain things aren't working, like it's funny, the movie was even more confusing at one point. But then we were like, okay, we need some hand holding here. We need some breadcrumbs here. That came from doing some of the winter assembly with my co-editor, like while we were pre-proing the summer shoot. And like, sometimes when you're on like an indie shoot, actually all the time you're on an indie shoot, but most other shoots too, you just never have enough time and you never have enough money to do anything, even if you plan that way. So sometimes when we were in the winter and summer shoot, that they were like, something happened and now we have to cut a day, or we have to like wrap early. What can we like streamline this day, streamline the scene? And my editing brain has to go like, all right, well, we don't need coverage here. I'll just start editing now while I'm shooting. Yeah. This is the shot here. Then it will follow this shot. Then it'll follow this shot. And it helped us quite a bit to have that crutch when I needed it, or when the crew and cast needed it for their own sanity and well-being. So yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I know you also mentioned you had like a map of like the physical locations. Did you also have like a script Bible to go along with all of the, like you were saying, the background to the science and where things would go, where things would lead, maybe even scenes that didn't even make it, or concepts?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in which I kind of asked every crew member and cast to be like, hey, how much do you want to know? Do you want to know it all, or do you want to know just enough to be able to do your job, or in the actor's case, to know enough what your character does? And it was kind of like a coin flip. So, and it would just be like pulling them off to the side. And, you know, I have it all here along with my documents, but I can just be like, hey, here's why this thing happens here. Here's why this thing happens here, just so they could do their job better. So like, for example, the 2 actors, Adam wanted to know everything. So I just was on a Zoom call for him with like 90 minutes and just kind of went beat by beat about what we have in the world and then what we will like show in the movie. But that's the window you get to see it in. You don't get to see everything else. Meanwhile, Riley was like, I want to know just as much as my character. Don't fill in the backstory. Don't fill in too much. Or like, if I need to fill in my own backstory with my character, let me know, but I'll work it out with Adam as well. And so we gave everyone the freedom to know as much or as little as they wanted to. And then that was kind of like the whole thing where like, if anybody really wanted to like pick it apart later, I just asked them like, all right, do you want to know what the movie wants to tell you, or do you want to know the actual thing? And yeah, it's fun. It's fun to go both ways.
I know you were talking about a bit about this earlier, but you leave some questions ambiguous. What appeals to you about a story that doesn't really tie up every loose end?
That's a great question, because I feel like every movie, when I watch a movie nowadays, I go like, there's like a filmmaker suspension of disbelief, where if I trust that the filmmaking team, the whole production, has given me the confidence that they know what they're doing with the camera, they know what to do with the production, they know what to do with their story. Like I kind of can tell like 15 minutes into a movie. If they win me over with that, I want to buy whatever they want to tell me or don't want to tell me. And then that's the storytelling instincts, but also like the direction the movie wants me to go. And so when a movie leaves me like lots of questions, like I love Garland's Annihilation because that movie just,
oh yeah,
some of it is just explored very scientifically, and some of it is just washing over the characters and takes over. And that ending is so full of ideas. Nothing's really explained at all, especially in a way that just like, here's someone sitting down and telling you what's happening. And I love that. It lets me swim. It lets me not forget the movie. I feel like the worst thing that can happen to a movie of this kind is if you explain everything and then everyone's like, great, I'm going to leave the theater and never think about this again. Good science fiction can be challenging. And so I love when a movie does that. Now, if a movie is like, I want to tell you everything, and that's part of like, you get more of like this, like you see how the mousetrap works, you see how like every contraption thing works. There's also a satisfaction to that too, that I trust. As long as I trust what the filmmaking team does, I could have fun either way. I just tend to lean more towards the give me something I've never seen before and let me wallow in it for a long time.
That's what gives it rewatchability. I think even with the title, like I love the way that it plays in multiple ways, specifically with that sibling angle, like you were mentioning. We all have those moments where you haven't seen your brother or your sister for a while, and you promise that things will, they'll change. It won't be the same. And time travel is the perfect embodiment of like how you were saying, that you're able to put siblings against that cosmic horror and try to dissect how that relationship is going. So
absolutely. I mean, I have a lot of this is also based off me and my own sister. Like we have the same Zelda tattoo here on both of our arms. Let me move it over here. There we
go. Wow.
Yeah. So
Triforce.
That Triforce tattoo on my arm and is on the same place on her arm. And that's what inspired a certain tattoo thing in Things Will Be Different. It's our way of talking to each other without having to check in all the time, or if life gets in the way, we always have that to remember for each other. So,
beautiful.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of like weird movies that like explore sibling dynamics. There's not enough of them. Yeah. And especially when it explores like the dark downside of being estranged with a family member or a sibling, where you're just like, I promise things will be different. I'm going to go see you more. And then a year goes by, 2 years go by, and nothing has changed. Old habits die hard. So.
Well, you did a great job embodying that.
Thanks, man.
So we're talking about the questions that are left unanswered, but then there's always going to be people who try to fill in those answers. So I know Arturo was also curious about this. Are there any particular theories you've heard about your movie or ideas that people have thrown back at you since they got a chance to see them that you weren't expecting or that you hadn't thought of yourself?
Yeah, so definitely during the editing process, we had sent it to a few of our more science fiction driven friends. And there are theories, and, I won't spoil them here, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to let too much of influence people when they watch it or give away anything. But there was like one prevailing theory that we definitely did not design, but it still works really, really well. And I don't even know how we could have designed it. It's one of those weird things. I'll tell you off mic. But there's one prevailing science fiction theory that is so galaxy brained that I was kind of caught off guard by being like, whoa, that's such a great read. But we also had I know it's funny, like there's some people who are like, oh, I think I get it. Or there's some people I don't think I get it. There's like definitely about a dozen people that I've ran into at film festivals who pitched me exactly what we had written down, and I had no idea how they were able to do it, but they were able to do it. Like they were like, oh yeah, this is this, and then this all does this, and I went like, I pulled them over to the side, like, how did you get all that? Like, you got it. Like, it's crazy. So it's there for like the people who really wanted it, but I have gotten some theories that I were just like, wow, that's a read that definitely did not hit me until we were about to finish the movie.
Is there like a wrongest read that you've heard of the movie, or
that
does
you
it not
definitely
feel that
don't
way?
want people going in?
There's not been a wrong. I guess because I wanted to have some sort of audience engagement where like yes, there is an overall right answer that is like there, but also like I wanted enough like ambiguity where I'm a video game player. I love video games. And sometimes the author in a great video game narrative is the player. They make their choices. They have fun. I want to bring in some of that logic to people where they like, if they fill in some of their own gaps and it works for them, then it works as their read of the movie. So thankfully we haven't had anybody go like, here's what happened. And I go like, ooh, wait, no. That's not it at all. Like it hasn't quite happened yet. And I think that's where the good confusion, bad confusion worked for us, which is like, oh man, like we did enough where people went down the right path in the dark forest and not just get lost in a forest completely.
Nice.
We touched on South by Southwest a little bit at the beginning, but I wanted to circle back to that because we are used to seeing these movies at film festivals and sort of waiting on them to find distribution, get released. I know people who listen to us are always asking when is the movie going to come out, but I'm curious hearing about it from your perspective, bringing an independent film to a big festival like South by Southwest and then playing that distribution search game, and especially from the perspective of somebody who also like the movie's awesome, but it doesn't have like Adrian Brody or some big movie star in it to attach people to or sell people on. So can you tell us a bit about like what it was like premiering your movie and getting finding distribution eventually?
Yeah, absolutely. I could write a book about the entire process, not just from my perspective, but other filmmakers I've met who have been in the thick of it. It is a strange time in indie distribution, in that, to not get too lost in the weeds, but, the streaming model changes of the last couple of years have changed the way people are buying movies at the moment. It's to the point where you'll get some hot titles coming still out of festivals where you're like, hey, this movie got bought right out of TIFF before it left TIFF. That was great. And, more than likely those discussions were happening when they got into TIFF and it hadn't been announced yet. It was happening months before. So those are really nice. But sometimes a movie will just slip through the cracks and they're in tough negotiations. And, there's always going to be, there's like so many distributors out there that every movie playing at one of these, like what I would call like top level film festivals, are getting engaged by a lot of people. But sometimes the deal's not right or they're not getting the right terms. And a movie could just slip through the cracks and not come out for like 2 years. And it just happens because, budget levels, cast like obligations, producer obligations, financier obligations can stop a deal from happening and a movie from coming out for like well over a year. So it's to each their own, but also it's just a tougher game. Like 10 years ago, I went to TIFF for spring when we got into for that festival. And it was such a hotter market where people were constantly at restaurants and coffee shops and bars, just like talking about like, oh, we have these 3 or 4 offers for this thing and this thing and this thing. And it's just a little different now just because streaming got so saturated and now some of it's just still shaking out and people are playing more risk averse because they're like trying to see where the industry's going on the indie side. So it does happen. It's just way more scattered and can easily fall through the cracks if it just doesn't, the stars don't line up. So that's the more short, easy answer without getting too bogged in the details.
Yeah. Totally.
I remember speaking of TIFF, what would have been probably 10 years after for Synchronic, Zach was able to catch it there. And that was like a year where streaming was becoming very prevalent. The Bad Education had come out and we thought, oh, this is definitely going to be a hit. Gets picked up for HBO and it becomes a TV movie for the Emmys as opposed to an Oscar movie that could have had a theatrical run. So it's like, the landscape has changed so much. I can only imagine just to piece it all together to make sure that you have a good rollout.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's every movie has different things that they need and want. And sometimes you just have a distributor that's like, we like the movie, but our slate's full for like a year and they don't want to overload or they only have the bandwidth to do so much. Like what's funny is like we did get a lot of interest for Things Will Be Different for a while and it was just lots of talks with lots of people. And it's usually just trying to figure out what they're able to do with their business model versus yours. And that happens with every movie. So nowadays when you see if I watch a movie and I'm like, ooh, that was at Sundance 2 years ago and it's coming out, I'm just more like, thank God they got a home and got what they needed, because, you know, there's certain movies that you'll see at a film festival, more common nowadays than not, that you're like, you saw at the film festival, that's great. It may not show up for 2 more years. Or it could go back on the edit because they're recutting because of someone buying them, but they didn't like a certain thing. So it may be in a different form than when you saw it at South by or Sundance too. So it's crazy. And then now there's the whole pre-sale market too, which means like you go to the Cannes market, movies are bought 2 years before they're even made, and then when they go to a festival, they're just out and be out in like a week or something like that. So there's that other side too. That's crazy. It's a tornado of movies that are all just trying to find homes.
True.
Yeah, and it feels like the markets are constantly changing and slipping through our fingers in other ways too. So anytime a movie can actually make its way to audiences does feel like a bit of a minor miracle. Definitely exciting that your movie's coming out and people will have the chance to see it. Just to harp on it for a little second, because it is really interesting and we don't normally get that perspective. Like when you are like talking to these distributors and deciding what the best path is for your movie, like what are sort of some of the things that you're putting into consideration? Is it just the prices that they can offer? Is it the promises of theatrical versus straight to streaming? Like, what is ultimately like a big consideration when you're in your shoes?
It's all of the above, to be honest. Like you're looking at what they can. You're looking at like, hey, what can money they can promise you now when they buy the movie versus, and then what the splits look like. What's the avenue? The biggest thing that I noticed is like, what's the avenue to a giant streamer? Because some distributors don't have like, you know, a straight road shot to a Netflix down the line. Sometimes they have to make bids for like, hey, how much is Netflix or Hulu or Max gonna like pay for your movie? Now, some places like an A24, a Neon, or for us like Magnolia, it does have a pipeline built in just because of that company having that pipeline. So all their movies do just go to a place. So that's another big thing too, because you want people to go see the movie, but you eventually want people to see the movie on a streamer that they all have. And then that really gets the biggest amount of views, more than theaters. It's like, oh yeah, as soon as a movie drops on Netflix, you have like literally 100,000 people watching it in the first week. It gets crazy.
I keep hearing the sentiment that theatrical sometimes just feels like the marketing for the eventual home release or the streaming release.
People, and Netflix is when it like officially releases to them. That's why like when we catch a movie like yours, we're like, maybe you will have to go to a festival to go see it in a theater. Please go see it there, because for a lot of people, they're always just waiting for that Netflix release. So
and they're also trying to you know, there's sometimes streaming model can be like so many movies go there that market becomes like, oh, what's like a real movie? What's not like a real movie? Like what's like what was made really quickly or what was a festival darling? So theaters at least are still a thing to like bolster like, hey, this is a movie that deserves to be seen really big. It's a real experience. Go to this thing. So that was a big important thing for us too, was having a theatrical rollout as well. But yeah, I mean, we're all just trying to, you know, make money back so we can do it all again and hopefully get more money and more time to do it for the next time. But also, you just want a company that takes care of it. There's so many distributors that just like pick up a movie and drop it and they don't really support it. Like, you know, Magnolia, at least so far, has been incredible with our marketing side and really taking care of the movie. And so like, you know, you want a streamer who cares about your movie and is going to support it more than like, you know, anything else, because the real elephant in the room for us as, you know, for distributors is the self-distribution model. Is like, is that going to be a prevalent thing over the next decade? Is like, is it easier for a whole filmmaking team to like, hey, I'm going to go make this movie, but then I have all the same resources and I can call theaters. That's a big thing that's actually in a lot of discussion right now with a lot of filmmakers I'm talking with who are like, is it better to just do it also on our own? So that's another thing to think about for a while, where that'll be less of a stigma and more of like a common thing. But that's still very early ways of going. And that's why we're all kind of watching how the indie market goes. Like, how did Longlegs do? Longlegs is a huge like thing we are looking at right now, being like, is that a new model for indie movies in the horror space to go market and get out there? can that be done for everything, or is that just a one pop off? So we're all kind of seeing how the indie space is going all the time, and seeing what is a good model going forward for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I know you're knee deep in putting out your debut movie, but have you thought a bit about what's next? Are you working on anything, or what can we expect?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny because I have a few scripts that are out right now. I'm writing some more when I'm not in press mode or not in getting this movie out mode. I like being in the sci-fi space. I like being in the time travel space. So there's, a couple other scripts that I'm writing in that space too, but I'm also playing with more hybrid genre stuff. I'm playing more with
Nice.
more crime stuff, but also more comedy, more like romance. Like I'm playing with like other genres that could work that I haven't seen before that play within the sci-fi or time travel space. Like, if there is a Things Will Be Different is kind of like a Blood Simple. What is a Raising Arizona in this space? Like, what does that even look like? I want to explore that and see if we can have fun with it, or if it even works. I love being in this space right now because I feel like there's a whole bunch of untapped potential and cool ideas that can come from it. But also I'm working on other genres in completely different forms. So we'll see what shakes out. I have no idea.
That's cool.
Nice. If you just want to keep adapting Coen Brothers movies into sci-fi ideas, I'm for it. I'm
we'll
really
be
here
here
for whatever Hudsucker Proxy is going to be.
I was just thinking, I was rewatching Hudsucker Proxy the other day for like the 50th time. I was like, what's like a sci-fi Hudsucker? And Hudsucker's already kind of playing that weird space. I don't know.
For kids.
Before you go, do you want to tell us that galaxy brain theory behind Things Will Be Different? We could put up a spoiler warning or just cut this out if you don't want this out there before the movie is more widely seen. But I'm curious about it.
Spoiler warning for this, just because I really don't want anyone to be influenced by this, because I want people to come up with their own theories. Obviously, Things Will Be Different loops back on itself in that, Joseph's character has to go back in time to go back to the beginning of the movie in order to replace himself, in order to have a chance to possibly save his sister and make Things Will Be Different with the people that control the time travel house. And the heartbreaking thing at the end of the movie is that we see him and he's an old man and it's never worked out. No matter what he does, he's 40 years older. He's basically a shadow of his former self, and he basically asks for his life to be ended and whatever. So with that being in mind, the galaxy brain thing that people are getting when they watch the movie, especially if you're a sci-fi person, is that every single scene is a different loop of Joseph. And that's why he, because you're not sure you're trusting his character enough or not. So like, for example, there'd be one scene where somebody's like, oh yeah, he's like, that's the first loop. And then the next scene, he's talking about the safe and stuff like that. And he's like, oh my God, is that loop 10? That loop 20? And it kind of broke my brain, but it still works. Yeah. It's just somebody's just like Adam, or Joseph's character, I can't trust because he's got this book. He's kind of come from different things. Is he already doing the loop and we're in the middle of the movie before we even know it? And Riley's the only like consistent point of view that we live in. Watching that movie in that sense will kind of change how you look at that entire movie.
That's great.
You gotta adopt that one. That's a great theory.
There you go. It's yours.
It's kind of like it's almost like a very similar, like if you remember Westworld, like season 1, where you're kind of like, oh, everything's recontextualized because I have no idea that Man in Black is that, and everything's just now a different scene completely. That's the kind of take that blows my brain wide open.
That's awesome.
So, yeah,
that's great. Wow,
that's a great one. Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully you've already seen it, but that should be motivation enough. If not, things will be different. Really excited for more people to catch this movie. Thank you once again for joining us. This has been so much fun to talk and to record about this episode, or to record about time travel movies and your movie as well. So thank you again, Michael, for joining us.
Oh yeah. Thanks for having me. Wonderful podcast. And can't wait for you guys to check it out. And I can't wait to check out the rest of your year's podcast. I know you guys are deep into seeing how the festival scene checks out and how awards check out. So consider me a listener for the rest of the year and beyond.
Appreciate that, man. We got plenty of recommendations from Toronto and other fests for you, for sure.
Awesome. Best of luck with the film.